Hey everyone, welcome to Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast. I am Heather Hoops Matthews here today with Maynard Nexsen healthcare attorney Matthew Roberts. Matthew, good to be with you.
Good to see you.
And we are welcoming back a guest today.
Yes.
We'd like to welcome back Laura Gunter. She is the president of NC Life Sciences Organization. Now that's formerly known as NCbio, but now known as NC Life Sci. This is an organization that recently hosted its annual meeting, and it was packed with news and updates about the life sciences industry in North Carolina. And it's also where they launched their rebrand to now where we call them NC Life Sci. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Matthew and Heather. It's great for you all to have joined us at our 2023 annual meeting, which also happened to be our 29th annual meeting.
Wow.
So that being said, we have a long history of advocating for the industry in North Carolina. And really, as that industry has grown and expanded, our strategic planning process that we went through over this last year really highlighted the need to be very broad-based. So part of that is a name is important. So shifting the name to represent the full life sciences industry today was really an important marker and signal, we felt. The North Carolina General Assembly that we also work with very closely has a life sciences caucus. So we felt that aligned nicely as well. And then another maybe part of the reason is that one of our most important partners, the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, which is where we hosted our meeting. And I know you spoke with Doug Edgerton, the president of the Biotech Center. They had rebranded in recent years as NC Biotech. So while we were very much aligned with and supportive of the Biotech Center and do a lot of work legislatively with them, we did want to differentiate ourselves as the advocacy role that we serve is an important delineation and separation point from the state-funded biotechnology center. So all those things kind of came together to really inform us being the North Carolina Life Sciences Organization. And then lastly, I'll say that part of that strategic planning committee, or when a strategic planning committee member suggested the shorter version, NC Life Sci, I was sold. It's, again, short and sweet, maintains that connection to the life sciences, but it doesn't have initials, which we felt was important. And then the same can be said for our new logo that I think you all can share as well, which is a geometric double helix. But if you look closely, it's made up of the letters L and S. So I think kind of a cool way of really saying that we're very focused on the broad life sciences, which, as you know, expands beyond pharmaceutical to medical devices, the clinical research organizations, now the bioeconomy, and industrial bio, and certainly agricultural bio. So spend a lot of time in all those areas.
Well, that's good. It was certainly well received at the meeting, and we're glad to help promote it even more. So 29 years, that's pretty impressive. I didn't know that you'd been around that long and doing the good things that you're doing. So when we're filming this, it's early November of 2023, and I want you to look back and think, what are some of the highlights in the life sciences industry in North Carolina in 2023? It's hard to believe we're toward the end of the year, but could you go over some of those and share those with us?
Well, 2023 has seen really continued growth as many companies have continued working on their new facilities. I think, we've seen a little bit of a slowing in terms of announcements, but one of the things that I think has been really exciting this year is as we looked at the growth and we extrapolated forward about how many jobs were going to be required to fill all of the facilities that are now in the process of being built and coming online. The North Carolina Biotechnology Center actually spearheaded a grant proposal by the Federal Economic Development Agency. And so it's called the Build Back Better Regional Challenge Grant. And this area, North Carolina, was the recipient of $25 million focused on the life sciences manufacturing space. That's going to be working at HBCUs, the historically minority universities, community colleges, and then really an awareness campaign because, kind of the if you build it, will they come? We need to get out there into these underrepresented communities and make sure that they know what a tremendous opportunity there is in the life sciences. So that's really been going on this year, and I think that's going to definitely inform us going forward. I think the other thing that's sort of exciting is we were deemed the 4th leading hub for biotechnology activity by Fierce Biotech this year, probably due to all of those new the new growth in the manufacturing space. But, again, we haven't been immune to some of the funding issues for some of our entrepreneurial companies. And I think that stems from several sources, possible recession, and even some of the federal policies on drug pricing that have, companies and investors maybe holding back a little bit.
Your annual conference was right there on the Research Triangle in North Carolina. And of course, people all across the globe have heard about RTP. How do you think that impacts the life sciences organizations and industry groups in North Carolina? And perhaps I would say many, I think, would think it provides a great advantage.
Well, I think it definitely, the Research Triangle Park has made a difference over the years because it's really created a place for innovation, a physical place, taking advantage of the close proximity of the 3 research universities with the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, North Carolina State University, and Duke University. So that's really where it got its name, the triangle, because it's literally a triangle if you connect those 3 schools. But I think the other piece of it is really the park is very different than it was originally envisioned. It was a number of large companies and employers, and it was, of course, visionary at the time. And I think, today, as it's moved forward and it's become a little bit different, and now sort of that epicenter and that home for entrepreneurial growth and for some of those big companies to be here as well. So the other piece is the North Carolina Biotechnology Center is sitting at the epicenter of the park. That's where we have our events. So it certainly, I think, has become a symbol as much as that physical space. We have seen expansion beyond the physical bounds of the Research Triangle Park at this point, but it remains, I think, a place, a stake in the ground that North Carolina can really highlight and talk about. So, and as I mentioned to some legislators actually this morning, what North Carolina did with the forward thinking that established the RTP, then established the Biotech Center and put it in the RTP, and then in the early 2000s established BTech and Bright, and then the BioNetwork Community College program, those sorts of things that really set us up for success, 20, 30, 40 years in the case of the Biotech Center down the road, is the kind of thinking that we really need to continue today to be at the forefront of the industry.
Laura, as a follow-up to that question, there are lots of large established life sciences companies in the Research Triangle that are members of NC Life Sci, but it's still a very good environment for the startup investors. Can you talk a little bit about how those 2 types of life sciences company are coexisting in the market in the state? Because to have such a well-established market of very large life sciences companies, but still allow the startup to work effectively, there's got to be some secret sauce for that.
Well, I think, some different things I think have probably kind of informed that. Part of it is we do have the strong research universities, and as companies have spun out and been successful and, either have gotten to the point of commercialization or have sold their technologies, I think that has pushed back a little bit into the university, and there's some little bit different thinking now. There's like interest in oh, hey, I can leave the university and I can go start a company. And so there's some of that. And then, really, as we've had some changes, GSK was here for many, many years and had a huge research arm, and some of that is pulled back. But what you found is that those people that were working there, they were interested in staying here in North Carolina. They'd established their homes. They loved the mini microcosm of North Carolina, from the beaches to the mountains. And so those same folks sort of started their careers with smaller opportunities and small companies, and said, no, we're going to stay here. And we're able to bring money and bring establishments here as well. So I think there's a lot of, good synergy in that regard. I think it's an interesting dynamic, certainly on the talent space, because large companies need so many people and the smaller companies don't need as many. But I think there's that balance between the associate degreed folks all the way up to the PhDs, where, as somebody this morning mentioned, is the CFO of a company that when he walks into a room of scientists in his company, that the average the average IQ drops by 30 points. And of course, exaggerating a bit, but I think there is a lot of talent here. And so we've been able to nurture, I think, both of those things and really keep the focus on both the broader economic development opportunities, but also the value of the innovation.
How do you think that the Inflation Reduction Act will impact pharma and also the life sciences industry in general?
Yeah, and earlier I said, some federal programs that were maybe impacting the industry, and I certainly was referring in part to the IRA. What Medicare calls a negotiation is actually more of a price setting or price control. So that right there is at odds with a free market economy. And with price controls, it does mean a reduction in revenue. And as an industry that pours more revenue back into R&D than most others do, they need to evaluate how they're now going to spend those R&D dollars. Will they be focused in-house, or will those partnering deals, which is where a lot of technology comes from, the small entrepreneurial companies in partnership with the larger companies, where will those things fall out? What will happen? And our small companies are dealing with some of that, now, where maybe that partnership that they had is not going to continue any longer because the larger company is sort of pulled back, waiting to see what in fact happens as negotiation goes forward. The other piece of that, or another piece of that, is the small molecule penalty, which provides price controls begin for small molecule companies at 9 years instead of 13 years. So how does that impact where companies focus their dollars? If the major revenue source is going to be sort of at that 9 to 13 year period where they can really recoup much of what they spent on that R&D to then feed back into the next drug and next opportunity. If that's eliminated, then do they shift their strategy toward large molecule drugs, and the small molecule drugs kind of fall away and don't get the funding and the attention, which is, I think, somewhat of maybe an unintended consequence of the legislation, but it's there regardless, and it's it is real, because so much of what funding and all happens based on that, what's sort of set out there in the long run, what's that certainty, what's that recovery period, when am I going to get my investment back? And so, we say, okay, well, what's impacted there? Well, cancer drugs, neurological drugs, things like Alzheimer's. There are many diseases like Alzheimer's that require small molecules because that's what can cross the blood-brain barrier. So, right at a point when we have an aging population, all kinds of neurological diseases are prevalent, we're dealing with dementias and others, is that really sort of the message that we want to send to disincentivize activity in that space? So that's certainly been frustrating. And while there may be some short-term reduction in prices, and several players in that chain, like insurers and PBMs, weren't even affected by the IRA, so it's not clear what that out-of-pocket benefit will be. But it does cause concern for diseases and genetic defects where patients are waiting for hope and there aren't any drugs. And so if we're providing a disincentive to look at research in those spaces, we may be limiting what's going to be available, and it may not happen today or next year, but it may be in that 10, 20 years out, where we don't have as many new drugs coming to the market.
So that wouldn't be an immediate thing. We won't see an immediate impact. That's going to be the mid-range, long-term.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I think the more immediate is the limit on the investment side and
Right.
what that impact will be. That long term will mean that we won't have the drugs coming to market that will be, the impact on patients. But today it's probably the impact on those smaller companies or even larger companies and just what kind of programs that they're able to pursue.
Right. So as we look at 2024, can you talk a little bit about what you're going to be looking at and tracking both at the state and federal level with respect to whether it be legislation or other policies that are being addressed or market trends in the life sciences industry?
Well, one of the things and another sort of piece of the IRA was some disincentive on rare diseases as well. So actually Representative Wiley Nickel of North Carolina has recently introduced the Orphan Cures Act, and that would remove that disincentive for rare disease, which basically said you are exempt from negotiation if you have a single indication in the rare disease space. However, really once you've got one drug, there are multiple diseases that may be, you may be able to impact with a single drug or a small tweak. And so if you bring those online, then all of a sudden, negotiation is back on the table. So that hopefully will take away some of that disincentive. So we'll be following that kind of thing and those tweaks on the side. We certainly don't see a change overall in the broad IRA and some of the price controls, but we think that we can hopefully right some of those things that are particularly heinous to the in the bill. I think from a North Carolina focused area, we'll be very focused at the state level on innovation policy and workforce. Again, the BBB has been wonderful to really kind of reinvigorate and jumpstart the opportunities for workers across the state to get into the life sciences industry. But now we will need the state to kind of pick up where that BBB will leave off and make sure that what we put in place as far as HBCUs and community colleges, that will continue, and that will take some funding by the state to make sure that those things continue. I think infrastructure, whether it's water, wastewater, energy, those two will continue to be a focal point for us. In a discussion again, with some legislators today, we were talking about that very thing. Our state, like others, when you get into the individual towns and municipalities, sometimes they don't have the funds and the resources to manage, a large investment coming to town on the manufacturing side. And so how do we balance the benefits of those companies coming and what they're bringing with the limited resources, in an individual community. So those are a few things that we'll definitely be watching to make sure that we're able to continue expanding and growing effectively.
What about workforce too? You've got a better than usual workforce available for the life sciences industry. I presume that continues to be something that's on the rise.
Yeah, and like I said, back to whether it's an HBCU, whether it's a community college, whether it's basic funding, for BTech, which is the Biomanufacturing Training and Education Center at NC State. Those programs have been instrumental to really our being able to secure many of those announcements and manufacturing companies coming. So continuing to make sure that the legislature understands the importance of those and continues to fund those. On the community college side, sometimes it's a matter of literally funding or paying for an instructor. That's vitally important. One of the things that's been really, I think, good here is and I would say most of the pharmaceutical companies that come here and land here with manufacturing, they really do want to be part of the communities. And so that often includes having some of their employees be adjunct professors and, helping with some of the training and being engaged in other community activities, working on STEM projects. Many of our companies are very interested in not just the immediate pipeline and who's in college and community college now, but who's being interested and who's getting engaged in STEM in middle school and in high school, so that pipeline continues.
Good.
Well, Laura, you certainly have a lot on your plate, but it is, as we saw at the annual conference earlier this fall, it's just an energetic group, a robust, energetic
sure,
group
yeah.
of life sciences professionals in your state. It's exciting to watch what's ahead of you. On behalf of Matthew and the whole team, one, thank you for letting us come and record live at your event. But secondly, thanks for following up with us. It's good to have you on and have you look forward, and we wish you the best with continuing to launch out NC LifeSci, your brand new branding for your established organization.
That's right. That's right. It's a brand new name, but next year will be 30 years. And so we want to make sure that isn't lost in the conversation either.
Yes, no, 30. Well, we'll have you back on in 30 years,
for the
and your 30th for sure. We wish you the best. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And I'm glad that we've got some other folks to talk to you at the meeting. It is very, very exciting time to, I think, be in North Carolina and to be part of the industry. So happy to be here.
Thank you. For those of you who joined us today, we hope you learned a little bit more about the life sciences industry in North Carolina and everything that's going on there. And for those of us here at The Pulse, we look forward to seeing you next time right here on Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast.